Hi everyone, this is another vlog from me. Hope everyone is doing well so far. I know it's been a while since I've been doing these vlogs, especially since I've been kind of getting used to the new semester and just trying to figure things out, especially since this is the first semester of my last year at CSU East Bay. So there's just a lot on my mind right now that I really just trying to figure out, especially when it comes to just graduating and just what am I going to be doing after I graduate, as it's just coming really close though. So I've been trying to think of what jobs to apply, just applying wherever I can, which I'm having some struggle just trying to do because of just all these different deadlines I have to navigate and be flexible with and kind of adapt to. And also the fact that I have a new on-campus job. So I really can't talk too much about it though, but it has to do with working with students. So that's pretty much all I could say about that. I'll tell you all more about it until I guess when the semester ends, after my job's done. But other than that, I'm doing okay. I've just been really stressed out about just a bunch of things on my mind right now. A lot of it having to do with people and school and a lot of things that just adds to the messiness of being a college student. So as shitty as it may be, I think it's something that I'm just gonna have to suck it up and deal with. So there's that. But anyway, that's not really partly why I wanted to start this vlog. So I guess part of the reason why I wanted to vlog today is just talk about how my day's been so far and kind of what I've been doing overall for the week. So for this week, I just had a quiz for my STAT-640 class, which is this advanced probability class that for those of you in the MS Stats program or about to do the MS Stats program, you take this around the beginning of your second year, ideally, in the Masters in Stats program. And it's a program, and it's a class that expands on a lot of the topics that you covered in STAT-620, the beginning probability class, where you do talk about different distributions, but he also gets a little bit more in depth as to how to do joint distributions, where do, say, hypothesis testing come from, and all these different little tidbits that really help you understand kind of how a lot of the statistics that you may be seeing in data science and all that, how all that work. So it's really useful information to know. I mean, you're probably not going to use this in the workplace unless you're doing like PhD level research, but it's kind of nice to know where things come from rather than just, hey, there's an algorithm, plug that stuff in and pump out some numbers. It's not like that. So having that knowledge really does give you an advantage as you know what it's used for, why it works, and all that stuff. But yeah, STAT-640, it's been kicking my ass for a couple of days for sure. As well, I'm doing okay, and I do understand the concepts to a degree. It's just a lot of work. I'll admit that. It's just a lot of work. Because it recalls quite a bit of information from STAT-620. So for those of you folks in STAT-620, make sure you know your distributions, know at least conditional probability, all those basic theorems dealing with probability and dealing with multiple events, order statistics, creating density functions, all that stuff, because that is going to play a role in 640. As well, you do review it a little bit at the beginning of the semester. They kind of go by quickly because they assume that you already have that knowledge beforehand. I mean, one way to kind of look at it is take, for example, one chapter that deals with random variables. There's like this one section in the STAT-640 textbook we're using where they cover all the major discrete distributions all in one section, as opposed to in the STAT-620 textbook where every section in a chapter is devoted to one particular distribution, which gives you enough time to actually learn what how the distributions are and what are the parameters for each distribution, which is pretty nice, especially if you're starting out and this is the first time you're being introduced to these distributions. But then once you start getting to STAT-640, it's assumed that you know all these distributions like Poisson, normal, gamma, chi-square, all these different distributions that they assume that you should have already learned about in your STAT-620 class. So that's just one major difference that I see between STAT-640 and STAT-620, just the pace at which they go by certain topics, as well as expanding on a couple that you kind of hinted at in 620, especially things like order statistics, for example, that weren't given much depth when compared to STAT-640. So there's little things like that that do feel familiar, but also really hard, for sure. And I'll admit, on top of my on-campus job and just my commitment as a club officer and all of that, and also personal obligations. Oops, hopefully it didn't create a big boom with the microphone and all of that. But anyway, with all these obligations, and then you have STAT-640, which actually takes quite a lot of thinking to kind of work through and kind of understand. I get this situation where I'm barely struggling to get by. Just now today, I just barely finished my homework for this class, the third homework, which is due tomorrow, but based on the way professor sets it up, it's actually due of Monday of this week. I say due in quotation marks because he pretty much gives you 2 weeks to do the homework, professor that I have, and after 1 week, he expects you to be done by then so you can spend part of class to basically ask him questions about it. Basically just minimizing the chances of having a case where you have a bunch of people just doing the homework last minute. So I guess it's his way of avoiding that. And I kind of see why, although I do find that given my schedule, it's just very hard to keep up with homework that way, just the way he sets it up, though. But regardless, I was able to get it in. Just that it's just really fast paced for me right now, especially with all these things that I have on my plate right now at the moment. But anyway, STAT-640 is kind of, it's okay, so to speak. And I'm kind of able to get by with the work. I just did my quiz yesterday, which, in all honesty, it's really stressing me out. Because it's one thing that I prepare for it. I had all these notes that I wrote down. All these different properties and propositions and all these different distributions. I wrote them down on this little cheat sheet that I got to use in class. But it's another when you have a time limit and you got this many minutes to figure a problem out. As whenever I'm just given some time limit and there's the pressure of completing it. Sorry, I thought someone was talking to me, but anyway. With regards to testing quizzes, whenever there's a time limit, I sometimes freeze and get stuck on what am I going to do. So, because I remember with, I think the quiz that we had yesterday, there were two problems. One of them was about calculating and getting some formula, and the other was just more of conceptual, where you have to identify something and then sketch something. That first question, I kind of blanked out because I had no idea what I was doing. So I immediately went to the second question where it was mostly numerical and just doing calculations and pumping out a formula, which was something like, okay, I kind of can do that, so I'll just do the more rote questions. But I was just so focused on that second question that I barely had enough time to do the first question, where at that point I was just kind of just writing down whatever just came to my head. Kind of just half-assing it, and I barely just had enough time to do it, and I ended up just turning in what I have. And right now I am kind of nervous about the quiz because I felt like I did not have enough time to really work through all the questions and all of that. And I think the professor is aware of that, as I think a bunch of students, not just me, have said that like 30 minutes is just not enough time to get through two questions that seems simple on the outside, but when you get through the motions of it, you realize they're asking a lot more than you think. So, and I think so while I understand that we can't always control these things, I'm just really glad that the quiz is kind of over with for now. That the professor does acknowledge the kind of the time constraints and how just pacing issue wise. So I'm just kind of glad he's aware of that. As I hope that, especially for our midterm next week, that he does consider the pace of the midterm and that just the amount of time that it would take to actually be able to fully process and kind of think through all the questions and then do them. So hopefully he considers that, so that way you get a midterm that is probably going to be pretty challenging, but you have more than enough time to be able to finish it, though, while still being able to showcase like how well you learn the material. So it's a really delicate balance that sometimes isn't very easy to implement, but I do hope that the professor is doing well with that, as I could see that he's trying his best though, and he's pretty nice though. So props to him though, for sure. Anyway, yeah, there's just, I don't know, just a lot on my plate right now, and just a lot of mental health related stuff, especially since I haven't been able to hike for the past couple of days, especially when the semester started, because of a lot of these commitments that I have. A lot of these things are just on my mind right now that have to do with just life management, just balancing my schedule and all of that, and just making some tough decisions, just how to just navigate it all, because I, for one thing, I'm not really good at making decisions. Sometimes when I make a decision, I'm always micromanaging, I'm always trying to maximize my option and thinking economically in terms of cost and benefits, and just what are the long-term effects of every decision that I make. A lot of it has to do with my fear of making the worst choices I could get and screwing myself over in the future. Because there have been times in the past where I've pretty much screwed myself over because of some poor decision making that I've implemented, and just having to pay for them, whether I unintentionally created that situation or not. And this could be, maybe I got too insecure about something that I back out of an event, and then looking back and then thinking, man, I should have just stayed. I should have just backed out at the last minute. Things like that to just add to how I can be very insecure about, I guess, what is the right decision? How do you make the right decision? Actually, that's probably another thing that I'm very curious about. It's one thing that is on my mind as well, for sure. So, anyway, what was I going to say? So basically it's just a lot of things that just have to do with just being firm with the decision, but also knowing when to be a little flexible. Because sometimes if I'm too rigid, I basically set myself up for failure, in that I may be less likely to listen to other people's viewpoints or opinions and all of that. And then on the other hand, if I'm too flexible, it's easy for people to take advantage of me. And that can very happen, even when I'm doing so with the intention of being nice, not realizing or remembering that people can take advantage of that. Because yes, you can be a nice person, but people will definitely take your kindness for granted. And that's something that I'm just trying to learn, though, for sure. As I can tend to be very trusting by default, but just after what I've experienced in the past, especially during my time in grad school, I think I'm slowly trying to get hang of it as to, I guess, my intuition, and also when's a good time to be trusting of someone or to be lenient towards them, and when's a good time to set boundaries and to assert them, no matter what other people think. So it's a very delicate balance, like kind of a delicate dichotomy, and it's not something I'm going to get perfectly, as there will be times where I'm going to mess up. I'm going to apply a certain idea in the wrong situation, or I might be lenient when I should have been much strong and firm with my boundaries, or I'm strong and firm with my boundaries when I should be more lenient. All these things that just add to the grayness of it all. And no amount of preparation or overthinking or discussion is going to change that fact. As at the end of the day, I got to make a decision. Because if I don't, the world's going to make one for me, whether I like it or not. It reminds me of something that this former Navy SEAL who's also a leadership coach who wrote a bunch of great books like Extreme Ownership and Leadership Strategy and Tactics. This guy, Jocko Willink, once said, the enemy gets a vote. Because if you don't make a decision, the enemy will pick one for you. And the enemy doesn't necessarily mean a particular person or group of people. Sometimes the enemy could be the environment or certain things that are working against you. So it could be something like getting a homework done and your enemy being time itself. Or when you're going on a hike, your enemy being the weather or anything that might prevent you from hiking successfully. Something like that. And it's those situations where you really have to realize that as much as you want things to be better, you have to realize that sometimes things are just not in your control. Because as much as I could pray for a good, bright, sunny day like this all the time, while still understanding that you do need some rain every now and then, I can't directly control the weather. I can't just turn off the rain or snow whenever I want to. It's out of my control. And so in an event where I'm doing something and the weather ends up messing with my plans, it's very easy to blame the weather, but not myself. And which sounds kind of odd though. I get it that, I shouldn't be just constantly being too hard on myself for things that are just out of my control. At the same time, I have to recognize that even if things are out of my control, I gotta remember that I still have control over one thing, and that is how I deal with it. How do I deal with discomfort? How do I deal with the situation that's just out of my control or just a bad situation or a bad outcome? Because I can't control what happens or not all the time, but I can't control what I do about them. So in the case of the weather, I may not be able to control the weather, but I can control how I react to it. As I can do a couple things. Maybe prepare ahead of time, knowing that the weather could sometimes be bad when I least expect it to. Maybe check the weather before I do something. So that way I at least have a sense of what's going on so I can plan better. And plan effectively that even in the case of bad weather, I can at least do some damage control to mitigate the effects of these outside forces on the success of my plan. All of these things that I can do moving forward actively that will make sure that I'm putting myself as well as putting others in the best position possible to succeed. As I think the key overall, as long as you're trying hard, isn't so much about being perfect. It's also about being resilient in the face of adversity, being able to give it all you got and really continue to push in spite of whatever obstacle that's in your way. Because I find that by focusing on the things that you can control and taking attention away from the things that you can't control is how you lead, win, and succeed. And it's how you create a state where you're empowered, you're strong, and you have the willpower and mindset needed to take on any challenge that comes across you or comes along your way. Yeah. So anyway, I think this is probably a good time to kind of end this video. I kind of wish I had brought my tripod though, because kind of holding it up, my arm gets really tired, and sometimes I'm just kind of like moving it in and out and all of that. And yeah, so I kind of wish I was much more prepared, but hey, it happened, but I managed to make it work and I'm powering through it, even though I probably should have brought a tripod. So that's focusing on what you can't control for you. So anyway, I'm gonna just sign off right now. So hope you all enjoy my vlogs, despite how candid I can be. And I want to say thank you all for listening, staying tuned for my vlogs, and hope you all stay tuned for the next vlog. So thank you all and take care.